Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on seizing the Pro AV opportunity, market entry tips and strategies for MediaTech vendors. I'm Lorenzo Zanni from Dovetail Creative, and I will be moderating and hosting this webinar. Today's session is structured into two parts, an insight presentation, which I'm doing now, and a panel discussion as well. So is basically what we will cover today. First, we will examine the market opportunity that Pro AV presents. Then we will discuss the key challenges you might face as a vendor when entering this market, along with tips and strategies to overcome them. And finally, as mentioned, we'll transition to our panel discussion where you'll hear directly from two industry experts who successfully entered the Pro AV market. Before I start with the presentation, I want to remind you that this is an interactive webinar, of course. So remember, you can engage with us through the chat and the Q&A functionality, which you should see on Zoom, to ask questions, but also to leave comments. We appreciate you engaging with us and asking questions. And feel free to do so throughout the webinar. And I will keep an eye on those two areas throughout the webinar. But let's start, and let's first examine the opportunity that the Pro AV market represents. The numbers here on this slide tell a story about why Pro AV is attracting the attention of the broadcast community. According to Avixa's projections, the Pro AV market is set to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 5.4% in the next 5 years. And its total market size is approximately 5 times larger than the entire broadcast and media technology sector. So it's a bigger market. The AV broadcast segment, which is the intersection where broadcast technology meets Pro AV applications, is growing even faster than the traditional broadcast and media technology sector. And in 2024, this segment alone was valued at $18 billion by Careta Research. And with traditional broadcast budgets under pressure and with Pro AV investment on the rise, more broadcast and media technology suppliers are looking towards Pro AV for their future growth. And what's driving this convergence between broadcast and media technology and Pro AV? If we look at the drivers on the supply side, we are seeing broadcast and media technology becoming increasingly accessible due to the impact of general purpose technology, IT technology. And IT is, of course, influencing Pro AV as well, creating a natural cross-pollination between these two sectors. And IT advancements have also dramatically lowered the cost barriers for content creation and distribution. And on the demand side, those same lower barriers have democratized who can create and distribute video content, which now also includes corporate organizations and companies that are not media companies. Social media and streaming platforms have made media more ubiquitous than ever before, and the rise of the creator economy, further accelerated by AI more recently, is pushing these trends even further. The result is that more non-media organizations are increasingly interested in and investing in broadcast and media technology, which of course creates opportunities for vendors. And to better understand some of the characteristics of the Pro AV market, let's look at its two major trade shows, arguably, IC in Barcelona and InfoComm in Orlando. If you don't know them, they're a bit like IBC and NAB for our industry, arguably, and they cover two different geographical areas. IC is bigger and attracted 85,000 attendees in 2025, while InfoComm's attendance was slightly less than half of ISE's figure in 2024. And an important insight when approaching the Pro AV market is understanding its structure. Looking at the attendee breakdown for these major shows reveals an important insight. In fact, roughly 70% of attendees represent channel partners, so integrators, resellers, and consultants who recommend solutions to end customers, while 30% are final technology users. And this is a key point and something we may discuss in the panel too. Now I'll focus specifically on ISE as a case study for understanding the structure of the Pro AV market. Looking at ISE, historical growth tells a story about the Pro AV market's expansion, particularly in recent years. After a predictable decline during the years of the pandemic, attendance has rebounded dramatically in recent years, reaching an all-time high of 85K attendees in 2025, as I mentioned earlier. The exhibition space at ISE is organized now that it's based in Barcelona into distinct technology zones that provide insight into the market structure as well. There are 8 halls at the venue in Barcelona, and each focus on specific technology segments and applications, which I've tried to illustrate here on this slide. For broadcast and media technology vendors looking to enter the Pro AV space, probably all 4 and 5 deserve a little bit more attention. All 4 is explicitly dedicated to AV broadcast technology, which they sit along digital signage digital signage in this hall, while all 5 is classified as multi-technology, although there are some broadcast tech vendors who you would see at IBC and NAB, for example, in this hall as well. This year, I've looked specifically at the companies exhibiting in the AV broadcast hall at ISE, and I've identified 4 main technology clusters or segments. Streaming connectivity, as you can see on the chart, represents the largest segment I've identified, closely followed by content acquisition and production. And then there are some companies and some technologies focused on immersive and display, and also audio solutions. This distribution roughly reflects where broadcast technologies are finding the most traction in Pro AV applications as well, though this is a dynamic area too. And this is a breakdown of end users at ISE by their business area of focus, and this is some data that ISE provides, so you can check it out as well. It shows that the Pro AV market isn't a monolith. It's composite and is made up of multiple vertical sectors, each with unique needs and applications. You can see that education leads the pack, and broadcast and media accounts for about 12% of attendees. And you can see, of course, the diversity of sectors represented at the show as well. This diversity represents both a challenge and an opportunity for broadcast and media technology vendors. The opportunity, of course, comes from expanding your potential customer base beyond traditional broadcast organizations, but the challenge lies in navigating these different verticals with their unique requirements and their unique buying patterns, as we will see in the next part of this presentation. So let's have a look at the key challenges you'll face when exploring the Pro AV market and share some practical strategies for overcoming them as well. The challenges of entering the Pro AV market can be grouped into 2 main categories, which I've illustrated here. First is the composite nature of the Pro AV sector, which I've just mentioned, the fact that it spans multiple vertical industries with different needs. And second is the unique buying patterns within Pro AV, which are different compared to broadcast. Let's have a look at each of these challenges more closely, and discuss also some practical approaches to addressing them. The first major challenge is navigating the composite nature of the Pro AV market. As I said, unique, different needs, different decision makers, and specific technical requirements. This basically means, if we think about the implications, that one size fits all approaches simply won't work. And to overcome this challenge, it is good to do your research on Pro AV trends, different buyer priorities, and technology investment across different sectors, and to refine your messaging to address specific pain points and specific needs in different verticals. And something I saw a little bit at IAC as well, avoid the mistake of simply repurposing your broadcast marketing materials without a few terminology changes. The buyers in Pro AV will be able to quickly tell, and they will think that you don't truly understand their word. The second major challenge is related to the first one and is about navigating the complex go-to-market landscape in Pro AV. As we saw in the attendance breakdown of the two trade shows, roughly 70% of the Pro AV ecosystem consists of integrators, resellers, and consultants, and also other channel partners. And these decision makers influence purchasing decisions. This means you need to develop strategies for both reaching end customers and also engaging effectively with these channel partners. And the messaging, of course, and the value propositions for each audience differ significantly. And also consider developing strategic partnership with established partners to accomplish this goal. The third challenge involves understanding the different technology expectations of the Pro AV world. There are, I know we'll talk a little bit more about this in the panel as well, but just some thoughts, some initial thoughts on this. Pro AV customers typically have high expectations for integration within their ecosystems. They also demand intuitive and easy to use solutions that don't require specialized technical knowledge to operate. Because many Pro AV installations, unlike broadcast environments, are operated by employees with no or minimal training. So to address these initial expectations, I mentioned two things. Design solutions that are easy to use without assuming deep technical expertise. And also, it's good to provide training resources, documentation, and support materials tailored to Pro AV users as well. And of course, it's good also to clearly demonstrate how your products integrate into popular Pro AV ecosystems. And finally, the fourth challenge, which is probably the most important one, is adapting to the application-focused mindset prevalent in Pro AV. While broadcast professionals often evaluate technology based on technical specifications and features, though arguably now a little bit less so, Pro AV buyers prioritize specific use cases and applications. They're less interested in technical capabilities and more concerned with how your products solve their specific business problems or enhance their environments. So to succeed with this audience, prioritize use cases over technical specifications in your marketing and messaging. And clearly articulate why your technology matters for Pro AV professionals, not just what it does technically. I've summarized all these insights into a 7-point checklist for entering the Pro AV market. Of course, I will share this slide along with the presentation after the webinar. We need to move to the panel now. But before I move to the panel discussion, I wanted to highlight an important event related to the convergence between Pro AV and broadcast that is happening at IBC 2025. IBC has organized a dedicated speed pitch event this year's show with the AV user group. This will happen on Thursday, 11 September, and you've got some more information on this event on this slide. You can see there is also a QR code on the bottom corner to get more information on this event. And also, if you are interested, if you're very interested, do let me know. Feel free to send me an email or to contact me on social after the event, and I can also put you in contact with the people behind this event. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. We've got Miguel Coutinho from NDI and Craig Newbury from STAGETEC. Can I briefly ask you to introduce yourself very briefly, what you do at your respective companies and why your companies has an interest in the Pro AV market, starting from you, Miguel, perhaps.
Sure. So I'm Vice President of Operations and Customer Success at NDI, so interact a lot both with end users, but also the licensees that embed our tech in their products, and also our support channel, of course, and our product function as well.
Yeah, I'm currently Managing Director and CCO at STAGETEC. I've been with the company now since the beginning of the year. Our interest in the Pro AV marketplace has actually been developing over many years. We've been doing a lot of business already in alternative markets to broadcast, and certainly we're interested in continuing to develop that into the future. And my responsibility is to make sure that we can continue to grow into those marketplaces and make sure that we can develop the vision and the capability of our company to provide solutions to that marketplace.
Thanks both. So before I start with my questions, I want to remind the audience that you also have the opportunity to ask questions by the chat and the Q&A if you like. We certainly welcome those. So feel free to do those, as I said before, at any point during the webinar. I want to start from that Pro AV opportunity I talked about at the beginning of my presentation. I cited some figures and some reasons why Pro AV is becoming more important. I wanted to get your views generally on the state of the Pro AV market, also compared to broadcast, and what did you see recently in terms of its growth? And you can share, some figures or some examples from your own business to kind of justify that. Craig, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I mean, certainly, like I said, at STAGETEC, we've been working in some of these alternative markets for some time now. And now, if I try to compare it to the traditional broadcast markets, as you've asked, I would suggest that some of the marketplaces involved in the Pro AV space, which are very varied. I mean, we have to remember that this isn't just one market, but it's a collection of different verticals in that market as well. Each one has its very distinct, diverse applications, and certainly from my experience, it's applications that are changing over time. It's a market that has very quickly evolving needs in a range of different dimensions, not just the technology. I'll talk a little bit about that later on. Certainly the size of the market, as you indicated in your presentation, is much larger. It spans a range of different verticals. We do a lot of business at the moment in corporate areas, sports venues, entertainment venues. We're actually responsible right now for installing a project for the largest audio network in the world right now, in a public space. But those being able to deliver upon those solutions requires quite a different set of skills for us as an organization than would have done in the broadcast space.
That's interesting what you said about skills as well. And maybe we can talk about that later a little bit as well, in terms of what skills are required. Miguel, what's your view in terms of the Pro AV market and its, compared with broadcast as well?
So obviously the angle we see things through is also having started in the broadcast world, first in more tier 3 and tier 2, and then most recently growth in tier 1 broadcast. When we look at Pro AV and comparative broadcast, and outside of all the information already shared, like the markets are completely different in terms of size, growth profile is completely different. We are also seeing more dynamism, if you will, in the Pro AV market, not only in live production, but specifically in, for example, collaboration in conferencing, with lots of companies that we can all relate to that are more prosumer or consumer oriented, trying to enter the Pro AV market because technologies are similar. And as you pointed out, the end user expectations are also very similar. Things just need to work. We obviously also see lots of our licensees trying to do the jump to Pro AV. First, starting with the overlap in the live production space. I think anyone that has been to a corporate office in the last 5 years has seen the changes that have happened in those offices, right? Like nowadays, offices have studios, CEOs communicate through broadcast production facilities inside corporate events, right? And so I think that's the pathway that most broadcast companies are trying to go to. I think Dan and Greg also pointed out to the different verticals. I think it's more challenging to then jump from Pro AV live production to signal distribution in the different verticals. Like it's 2 completely different markets. So I think many companies from the broadcast world, no matter if they are software, hardware, system integrators, or production houses, I think they actually might find it easy to do the jump, right? Because they bring a lot of live production knowledge, but then the growth might stop very rapidly just because then you hit different types of requirements, basically. So that would be my intro to the question.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's an important point as well. Craig mentioned skills, and you mentioned different areas as well, also in terms of technology application. So whether you are, for example, in live production or signal distribution, those are 2 different games, and it might be easier to enter, for example, if you're in live production. So let's move to the kind of bigger discussion in terms of the differences between Pro AV and broadcast from a host of different perspectives. As I mentioned in the presentation, of course, there is an opportunity in Pro AV because there's a lot of money, a lot of different markets, but there's also a risk, particularly for smaller technology vendors, to stretch themselves across different verticals, stretch their resources. So first I want to ask, how you manage that kind of, how you balance that? How you balance cost with, opportunity, let's say. Perhaps Craig, you can talk a little bit about that and maybe mentioning the skills thing you mentioned earlier, the kind of different skills you need to approach Pro AV.
I think from our perspective, it's important to recognize that it's not just about how you deploy the technology, but how you build your business around trying to satisfy some of those diverse requirements that range of customers has. And Miguel was talking about an easier way of entering some markets because they're familiar with some of the technology, but perhaps they have different requirements from us as a business in terms of how we support them or how we can furnish repairs or spare parts and how quickly we can get those to the customers. So a lot of being able to be successful in those alternative markets is not just about having the right solutions, but how do you go to market correctly in the right kind of way, and how do you build a business that supports all of those elements that customers need from us. And that goes all the way across what I call the customer journey. It goes from having the right kind of sales force that can get out there and empathize with the customer in the right kind of way to understand the challenges that all the stakeholders have, not just from the technology perspective, but how do we satisfy the operational needs, the commercial needs, and some of the more esoteric needs that customers might have. How do we develop a good marketing? I mean, that's a big topic, actually. You raised that, Lorenzo, earlier about how do you pivot your communication to something that actually resonates with a different audience? You know, a lot of people don't understand or care to understand how good your technology is. They want to know what problem you're solving. And you know, just simply communicating that through your marketing is also not good enough. You need to have an organization that can communicate and live that value proposition too, and be able
Culturally
to
as well.
yeah, and to actually understand that with and empathize with the customer upon that. And that's, you know, that's part of becoming a more solution orientated vendor. Actually, is about you know, understanding the problem, not the product you're trying to sell.
Yeah.
And then all the way through to support as well. You know, I mean, it's making sure that, and personally, I think that's actually a larger part of making sure you can be successful in the marketplace that we're talking about there, is making sure that we've got a support function that can understand the needs of the customer, can satisfy those needs very quickly in some cases, you know, be able to recognize that customers that have 24/7 requirements that need solutions in minutes, not months, can be satisfied in the right kind of way, because that takes a different type of discipline actually, and that needs to be, in some cases, that needs to be rebuilt into the organizations that are trying to supply these markets.
That's great. So that's interesting. So not just technology, business, culture, and changing. And you know, I would kind of maybe summarize that. Listen closely to your customers, to your different customers in different markets. Miguel, do you agree with that? Is there anything you want to add on this topic of you know, serving the Pro AV market?
Yeah, definitely. So I definitely agree with Craig. I can talk a little bit about the go-to-market from a different perspective,
Yeah.
right? So we license our technology to OEMs, ODMs, ISVs, and so on, right? So I can tell you that NDI has been growing very organically in the broadcast market because we have a free SDK, because we have or the NDI SDK, we have free tools that any user can use and so on. And it's easy for you to think, oh, NDI just uses those things, turns itself to the Pro AV markets, changes slightly the targeting ads and the marketing campaigns, and that's it. People download tools, the SDKs, and they do stuff, and we grow organically, and that's far from the truth, right? So people expect way more simpler solutions. So it's not only simple to use, but simple to integrate with the systems they already have. So there are not many companies willing to change everything just because your technology looks amazing and puts a lot of effort.
Yeah.
So what Craig said of the expect the solution for tomorrow is a little bit of this as well. I also would say there is, and I think in the next point we might talk about this a little bit, but there can't be like half solutions. You either have the whole thing and everything works, or it's really challenging for you to enter into a new market because you will have 3 or 4 others that have already complete solutions. Yes, maybe in terms of tech specs, things are not as amazing as the one you have, but everything else just works, and I can enter a conferencing room like this one I'm in, and I click a button and that's it, and it's just work. I don't care if it takes 1 second more or 1 second less. So yeah, the go-to-market, it's really different. I think sometimes people underestimate how different it is and how much effort you need to put, as Craig said, to sometimes even rebuild it.
Yeah, yeah. In the presentation, I talked a little bit about this and the fact that the market, the structure of the market is very complex as well, because you've got, you know, lots of channel partners, consultants, as you saw in the attendee breakdown. Is that something that vendors can have to take into account when engaging with the Pro AV market? So, you know, taking into account that kind of partnership element, which of course is important in broadcast as well, but maybe it's more important in the Pro AV world. What do you think, Miguel?
Definitely. From our perspective, for example, as a tech company, we partner with a lot of Pro AV brands that are already established, already have the right technology to help us develop further our technology towards the Pro AV, requirements.
Yeah.
So partnerships are definitely important. I think what we try to do is, for example, for each of those segments that you spoke about, the ones that are interesting for NDI, we try to find one or two key partners that can help us scale, let's say, in terms of technology, but also adoption. And I think in certain segments in Pro AV, like for example, collaboration, I think people also need to be very aware that there are 2 or 3 very big companies in the collaboration space that you either integrate with them or you don't, and you can't do anything, right?
You're out of the game. Yeah.
Exactly. So if your technology doesn't work with Teams or Zoom or some of these systems, like it doesn't matter how good it is, you are just going to be a niche thing and never probably scale. Also because, and this is also true for broadcast, but system integrators want to also standardize the tools they use, right? And they don't want to keep changing just because something is slightly better, because it also helps with economies of scale and so on.
Thanks, Miguel. And Craig, and this kind of partnership mentality is something that is part of the change in skill sets and culture you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the whole integration partnership topic is super important actually, and I mean, I would even suggest, you know, we're entering into the age where partnerships is absolutely critical, and having good partnerships. And you know, partnership can mean a lot of things, right? It can mean partnering with your customers. It can mean partnering with your sales network and sales channel, whether they're integrators, consultants, agents, resellers, and also partnering with other technology vendors as well to fill gaps that we might have in our own technology portfolio. And certainly, if I look at how we intend to be successful in the future, it's got to be in partnership with other people, because we can't do everything ourselves, and why would we try? But it's important. You know, one of the elements I would touch on in terms of how, you know, what's the secret sauce of being successful is having focus, owning something that you can do well, because there is such an opportunity out there. There's such a broad space of opportunity out there. No one can achieve everything. So, you know, focusing on the bits that you can do well. You know, from STAGETEC, we have some of the best, if not the best, quality audio solutions available on the market. So let's focus on that, and let's partner and integrate cleanly and well with other technology vendors that can provide part of the other pieces that are required in the technology stack to give customers a full service solution. To Miguel's point, I think it's, you know, customers are looking for something that just works, which is another kind of contrast to the broadcast space, where, you know, broadcasters used to have a lot of people that could do that integration, that could understand those complicated challenges that the technology blocks would bring, and the technology would enable the business outcomes. You know, in the Pro AV space, it's more about making sure that people can trust you as a partner, making sure they can trust your solution, that if they can roll something in, it just works. You're satisfying the whole partner ecosystem. You know, you're able to identify all of the different people and stakeholders that are involved in the decision making or the recommendation processes. That's a complex task by itself, and it's quite different to broadcast, I would say. I mean, I've experienced situations where there are multiple verticals of system integrators in the same account, with multiple stakeholders that, you know, might be 3 or 4 partners deep, because you've got, you know, architects and consultants and resellers all involved in the value chain. And you've got to be able to navigate that. You've got to be able to understand that, because every one of those different layers has got a different motivation that you need to satisfy. And certainly, you know, within STAGETEC, we've been able to navigate some of those environments to be able to get into some of the installations that we've got into the past.
Yeah.
But I think the whole partnership thing is really important. And I just before you move on, Lorenzo, I think do you want to touch on something that Miguel said earlier about simplicity? That's absolutely key. You know, with the diversity in the Pro AV space, there's a lot of different ways of using similar technology, but a lot of different needs based on the same technology. And one of our pillars at STAGETEC is having solutions that are simple. You know, we operationally, it just has to be able to be intuitive, be able to just work. I mentioned a project we've been involved with recently, which is the largest audio network on the planet right now. But to your point, Lorenzo, it's, you know, so some of the operators don't have the technical education, technical training that they might have had 20 years ago. So it's on us as a vendor. Our value proposition in that case is not just providing the audio network and the processing, but providing a way of operating that at scale, simply, easily, so that it can be done by anybody. And that, you know, that's where we use some of our tools like StageNet, which is our device orchestration and network orchestration tool, to be able to integrate all of those devices together and bring it up to a user interface that can be developed in a very simple way so that our customers can use these complicated technologies with complicated applications in a very easy to use way.
Thanks, Craig.
Can I just add one?
Yeah. I was about to ask you that, Miguel, before I ask you another question. Go on.
Just one quick thing. If I trying to summarize like the first two questions and agreeing with Craig, I think, at least from NDI's perspective, in the broadcast market, I think in many cases it's good if your solution or technology or product allows for creativity for different use cases, and like you as a user, an engineer, can do lots of things with it. So you have this toolkit basically. On the other end, in Pro AV, I wanted to do this thing. That's it.
Functional.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to do this thing. If it does other things, is like another workflow, another stakeholder, for example, or another place. But like in this instance, I wanted to do this thing really well with all the, and like checks all the expectations. I don't want any room for error / creativity, let's say.
Yeah, because creativity needs a little bit of you know, experimentation, and
Exactly. And
so that reminds me about another point which you raised, you know, when I think Craig raised as well, about tolerance, because we often say that broadcast is not tolerant. What about Pro AV?
I think it's way less tolerant.
Because people, I don't think, know that.
Yeah, no, I think it's way less. Well, you can look at it in different ways, right? Either way less tolerant or less tolerant, or in different dimensions. Let's say, for example, connecting to your tech question, probably in many Pro AV use cases, they are more tolerant of, like, it's not the highest spec, it's not the fastest thing, and so on, as long as it looks good and it works, right? On the other hand, there are very specific use cases where I think tolerance is actually, well, it's still way lower, but probably in surprising ways. For example, a very specific example is what sometimes in the industry is referred to as the spreadsheet codec. So usually you cannot see in a conferencing room display, for example, if you want to broadcast an Excel, not all codecs can do that, for example, up to the level people expect. So it's not only on the user experience, sometimes in the tech as well. But yeah, I would say less tolerant.
Yeah, Craig, do you agree?
Smiling because I think actually broadcasters are quite tolerant, and I've had some experiences in my career where they've been very tolerant with me in particular. And I think that comes down to the way the businesses are run, right? I mean, brings to root around issues when things aren't working as expected, at least in my experience. And typically lead times are a lot longer, right? So, projects are much longer tail. They're typically more infrastructure-like, so the scope is much larger. So there's a lot more time to kind of think about plan Bs. If I look at some of the work that we've done outside of the broadcast space, where things just need to happen, they need to, and they can't be stopped. And it's not just about a television broadcast, but maybe it's an audience of 100,000 people that have paid a lot of money to go and see someone play live, or have gone to a once-in-a-lifetime event that will never, ever happen again, like a big sports event, a global sports event, for example. Those kind of must-happen environments, which are very complicated and got a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders involved in a lot of different ways. That, to me, is a much less tolerant environment, because things just have to, you have to plug something in, you have to switch it on, it has to just work. And it needs to, if you need to change it, then you need to be able to change it very, very quickly. And that level of reliability, and to some extent, as I think Miguel was referring to earlier, that level of flexibility in terms of changing the use cases behind the technology, it's much more expected in the non-broadcast verticals.
Thanks, Craig. Miguel, I wanted to ask you one question, and perhaps Craig, you can share your thoughts on this as well, because there's also a technology development part to this, right? Because of course we talk about different needs, different priorities, and it's difficult sometimes to, I guess it's difficult to translate all these different needs into a coherent technology development plan, or so how do you do that? How do you balance this diversity of needs to develop technology that is good, for broadcast and to our different private sectors as well?
So I think in NDI's case, we want to keep interoperability layer, no matter the segments, no matter, like if it says NDI, you should at least be able to, for example, discover NDI-enabled devices, no matter if they are a display, a camera, or something else. But of course, then what happens after discoverability is going to be different. And so there things will break, but not actually break, because the ecosystems don't touch itself that much.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not easy. But I would say on the NDI side, like, we always want to keep a base layer that's interoperable and compatible, no matter where you are doing things, for what, where you bought the device. But then when we talk about audio and video transmission, metadata, and so on, there will be bubbles, and that's just the reality.
Yeah. So it's still about focusing. You focus on your most
Yes.
important priorities, which is integration, and you prioritize that over other things. Craig, do you want to add something on this?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of how the new market opportunities affect our technology development, it's really about how do we focus on the things that matter, but deploy them in the ways that are meaningful to customers. So what I mean by that is that we start now to develop more and more solutions that are based upon software. I mentioned one of our products, StageNet, a little earlier in the conversation. The StageNet is a solution that allows us to be able to deploy a range of the same technologies in different ways, and to kind of bring the operational layer outside of the hardware or software products that we're selling, and bring them into a centralized place, so it doesn't really matter what's behind it. It solves the problem for the customer. So there's a little bit more of that going on from our side. I would also say that we get, like I said earlier, there's so much opportunity, we can't get to it all. I mean, we get as a feature request, serve as a feature request. So part of trying to balance the technology investment into developing the opportunities that are available behind them is about trying to synergize that as much as possible. But sometimes it's about repackaging also. A good example of that is, we've had our Nexus product for almost over 30 years now. It's got some of the best audio technology available in the marketplace within it, but that form factor and deployment is not suitable for everybody. So we package that in a smaller form factor. We've got something now called the Nexus Compact, which uses exactly the same technology that we use in its larger big brother, but suited to a different type of audience and a different value proposition, right? We give the same IP, the same technology, the same experience to a completely different audience at a completely different cost point, but all we're doing is simply repackaging that technology in a different way, and meeting the different needs of a different type of customer with the same technology. So that's also part of our development roadmap as well, as how do we take that unique IP and reclothe it so that it looks different and makes sense differently to a different type of customer. And I think, lastly, I would just mention that just developing more modularized technology, more technology that's based on more modern technologies, more IP technologies and container-based technologies that are just more flexible, allows us as a company to be much more agile in terms of how we deploy new features and new capabilities to customers is also something that's affecting our sort of future technology investments in the future.
Thanks, Craig. I wanted to, before reaching the conclusion of the webinar, because we're quickly approaching that, although it's been great so far. I want to briefly focus again on the marketing and messaging. So we talked a little bit about that, in terms of what drives technology decisions in Pro AV. But I wanted to ask you another question about this, to share maybe, some examples of what works and what doesn't in Pro AV compared to broadcast. Of course, I mentioned the events, but if you want to add something about that as well. So generally, your marketing strategy, your messaging strategy in Pro AV, if you want to kind of share some of your experiences. Miguel, do you want to start?
Sure. So the first one is training. Like training, explaining to people how it works, how they use it, and how easy it is to use, how easy it is to integrate, to deploy, and so on. I think the second one is alluding to partnerships, showing that your product works with what people already know, in the way that people already know. So let's call this a brand association to other brands that people already know in that market, and that technologically you can integrate with and are already integrated, and things just work, right? An example with NDI is that it's fairly easy to bring an NDI stream into a Zoom or a Teams call, for example. Like, you need to highlight that so that you don't look like a niche solution again that will require lots of work and further development, let's say. So showing that whatever you are presenting just plugs into the solutions that people already know and are used to. It's really, 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 really important. So I would say those two things, to not give a very extensive list. So training and training, just to justify it just a little bit really quickly, I think at least in broadcast, sometimes people are more willing to learn at their own pace and look for information and so on. I think in the preview world, that's not so much the case from our perspective and experience. And again, associate your brand with the things your products work with and can plug and play with, and that people already know.
Yeah. So make it easy, both in terms of,
to understand.
Yeah, I know to understand. Thanks, Miguel. Craig?
Yeah, I think from my experience, it's and you mentioned it earlier right at the top of this webinar about how you'd seen at trade shows some of the messaging that had simply been repurposed from the broadcast industry, and how we're trying to kind of squeeze that into the mindset of people that actually don't really understand what we're saying, right? When we're using those type of messages. And from a practical experience perspective, I've seen that firsthand when I was working with a prior company, and we just launched a product, and we very proudly displayed this product, on a massive wall at the back of our trade show booth at ISE, and it made sense to us. It made sense to our traditional audience, but it makes no sense to the customers walking past the booth who don't know what this is, what it does, and potentially don't even know who we are as a brand. So, to recognize that, and to then the year after pivot to changing that stance on the messaging to talk about relevant, relatable, problem-orientated messages. What are we solving? Are we installing the best solution for stadiums or for public spaces? Or these are the things that anchor. These are the messages that anchor themselves to the customers, not the technology, but how the technology is deployed and what problems it solves. I think that's one of the most, certainly from my experience as well, it's one of the things I think a lot of people could improve in terms of how they try and tackle getting in front of that new audience in Pro AV. But yeah, I would agree with Miguel as well. It's about training ourselves inside our companies to understand the different the different market conditions and requirements, understanding the different motivations from customers. It's not just always about being cheaper and faster and better, but in some cases about making sure that we're taking care of people's brands, particularly in the corporate world. That's actually a really critical aspect of what the technology is supporting. And being able to understand that makes a difference to how you're seen as a good partner in front of the customer. So, all of that relates back into the marketing and how you communicate that to customers, and the way that you communicate with your customers and the various people that are involved in the value chain within the Pro AV marketplace. I think that's an area where I think is really important to develop. And it's an established marketplace, and there's lots of vendors there, right? There's a lot of people there to have to break through. So I think you've got to have a very clear value proposition. And again, I've mentioned earlier, sell the problem that you solve, not the product, right? It's really identify very clearly what it is that you're solving for your customer and go after it.
Yeah. Thanks, Craig. Thanks both. One final question. Of course, during this webinar, you shared a lot of tips and strategies for broadcast and media technology vendors. But if I am a vendor wanting to enter like the Pro AV space for the first time, what's the most important tip, the most important advice you would give me if you have to select one? I know it's difficult, but it's nice to end in this way, I think, to select the most important advice. Maybe you already mentioned it, but I'm sure you have. But what would you be? Do you want to start, Miguel?
Yeah, I think I can. So if your solution is end user oriented, the question you need to answer is, would I and my family be able to use this at home? If the answer is not, if the answer is yes, but it would require X, Y, and Z, being that more technology or studying a whole book and so on, I would then reassess the solution product I'm presenting to the Pro AV market.
Yeah. I would say great advice in general, because I think given our short attention spans and all of that,
True,
I
true,
think
true, true, true. But when you compare broadcasting to
yeah,
AV, I think that's even more and more
yeah.
and more true.
Thanks, Miguel. Craig?
I'm going to disobey you, Lorenzo, and give 3 tips. Sorry.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm
But
okay
I'll do
with
it in the same time as I will give 1.
disobedience. Yeah.
So the first one, and as a summary to some of the things I've already said, the first one would be focus. I think, like I said before, there's so much opportunity in the media space right now that reaching it is really, really difficult, if not impossible. So just, being clear about what you want to go after, and it's okay to take some left turns along the journey, but it's really important that you've got a clear understanding as to what you want to go after and develop a good go-to-market strategy for getting after that and owning it. Second would be communicate differently. Talk, as I've mentioned, talk about the solutions that you enable and not just talk about the fact that you've got a better solution than your next competitor. And lastly, leave the ego behind a little bit. I think nowadays, and particularly in the Pro AV marketplace, and less so than the broadcast space, fewer people actually make decisions based upon whether you've got the biggest and the best technology product, or whether it's been backed by millions of dollars of R&D investment or years and years of development. Customers in these new verticals, what they really care about is that your solution works and that they can trust you to solve a problem if there is one. And that is a different proposition from the business, actually, than just the technology alone.
Great advice as well. So, be humble, leave your ego behind, something. Another
Exactly.
piece of great advice in general, I would say, as well.
And
Thanks.
listen, and yeah, it's really important to hear what customers are trying to achieve, because at the end of the day, we're vendors. We're solving problems for our customers. We're not trying to force them into buying solutions for problems they don't have.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks both. It's been great. You've been great guests and panelists as expected. So I wanted to thank you for sharing all these insights. And thanks everyone for everyone who joined for joining this webinar and for listening in. It's always appreciated. We will make the webinar available on demand, so stay tuned for that. And wishing everyone who goes to InfoComm a great InfoComm. I won't be there, but I'll see you probably at IBC. Thanks, Craig, and thanks, Miguel.
Thank you, Lorenzo.
Thank you, Lorenzo.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks.